that tells wrestling fans we got the Hitman. Up front today, Bret Hart. He punched Vince McMahon. He hated Vince McMahon. Now he and Vince have a DVD. Has Bret forgiven and forgotten? Plus the panel on Olympic selections, on Delgado selling out, and the inside story on Danton. But today is all about the Hitman.
You're nothing but a bloodsucker, Jimmy Hart. You're a bloodsucker, and not bad enough. You know when you fight and scratch and snarl. The referee back again. Oh, he gave up.
Go get him, champ.
The best there is, the best there was, and the best that there ever will be.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the McCaig Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight.
Canadians are faced with tough choices. Coming up, our panel will be put on the spot, forced to answer what will be answered in the new year. Questions which will shape our next 4 years. Questions like Spezza or Lemieux. But up front today, Bret Hart, dear friend of OTR and a dear friend of mine. Are you feeling as good as you look?
I'm feeling great.
That is great news for anyone that has followed your career, and that would certainly include everyone who follows wrestling. And everybody who follows wrestling knows that you punched Vince McMahon. He was your sworn enemy. You now have a DVD along with the WWE and Vince McMahon. Does that mean you've forgiven him?
No, I mean, I've. It's more of a live and let live kind of thing. You know, I think that I'm grateful that they reconsidered where they were going with this DVD. I mean, it was originally going to be called Screwed, and it was going to all be all about Survivor Series and what happened with me and Vince.
And they were not going to portray you in a good light.
I
right?
don't believe so.
So you had this threat out there actually, which was, hey, we can do it with you, or we can do it without you. And if we do it without you, you're not going to like what you see.
Yeah, and it works both ways, though. My argument when I talked to Vince about it was like, why peel that scab off again? You know, I had a great career, a really good career, like a great career, long before what happened at Survivor Series. And I think it would be a mistake to minimize everything I ever did and build it around those last few hours. You know, what do they say? It takes 5 minutes to ruin, 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it, or something like that. And that's kind of how it was for me in Survivor Series.
So you haven't forgiven Vince, you haven't forgotten the things that he did with you. But at this point in your life, is it fair to say it was worth your while to work with Vince?
Absolutely. I mean, I've had some people say that they were, basically that I shouldn't have done it, that I shouldn't have been involved in the whole process. But they're wrong. I mean, I knew when I talked to Vince that it was really important for me it was one of the things that always bothered me, was I didn't want to be forgotten. I always wanted to be remembered and appreciated for what I contributed to the wrestling business. And I was always really proud of what I contributed. I really do believe that.
And well, you should be. But you were also faced with, you couldn't do this on your own because you didn't own the footage, because that was Vince's property, so you needed him for that.
Yeah, I mean, he basically owns every stick of all my films, so every stick of footage. I mean, everything I ever did, Vince has, with the exception of the Stampede Wrestling, which I made a point of doing a nice bit on that in the beginning of this DVD.
Would you ever get back into it in a bigger way, other than stepping into your role now, partnering with the WWE in a video? Would you ever actually get back and be part of the roster, if not to wrestle, to do something else?
You know, I think about that a lot, but I mean, I always come back to the same thing of what would I do? What Bret Hart, I think, or the Hitman, was always remembered for being a great wrestler. And I don't want to be remembered for being a great commissioner or a great referee between two guys, or a manager. Or, I think when I started in the wrestling business, I was a great wrestler to a certain degree. I really exemplified a lot of the really good things about wrestling. And when I walked out in the end, even though I didn't leave on the terms that I wanted to, I still walked out with my head up. And I was as good the day I walked out as the day I started. And that's basically what I want.
So you want to be remembered as Bret Hart, the wrestler, not a guy who who hangs on maybe too long and doesn't do the things that you were known to do?
Yeah, I don't want to. I wouldn't want to see myself like, you know, and I don't harbor any grudges towards like Hogan or any of these guys, or begrudge them in any way for going out there long past their prime. Like Flair, you still see him out there taking the big Beal off the top, and you know, I don't envy them. There's a part of me that almost feels sorry for them in the sense that they can't. That's all they have. That's all they ever will have is all they have is the wrestling and the people in it.
How about a guy like Shawn Michaels? Because I don't know if it was a coincidence. I probably think otherwise, that his new book was released at the same time as your video. Do you see that as a coincidence?
Maybe.
Now, he makes peace with his Lord because he's a born-again Christian. He apologizes for the things he did. The one guy, though, that he still seems to have some friction with is you. He said in his book, I know this is going to sound offensive coming from me, but Bret was not a great wrestler.
No, he's I think my wrestling speaks for itself, and I think that if you really understand, or you read Shawn's book and you have seen interviews by Shawn, that I think Shawn has a chip on his shoulder, and he's the one. He acts like he screwed me, that I screwed him over, and I think what it is it's a little bit like you know, the guy that shot Jesse James. You know, thought he was going to be a big hero, but everybody saw Shawn Michaels at the end of the Survivor Series swearing to God that he never had anything to do with it. He kept up that front for a while, and now he's come forward years later to say he was, you know, basically was the one that put the whole thing together, and they pressured Vince, Hunter, and Shawn to do what he did. You know, I always look at Shawn Michaels as this is one Christian that should be fed to some lions. You know, he's really a lousy person, and I think when you read his book, you see that he's not a very honest guy, and he's not a very good guy. I thought his book vindicated me and made him look like a real jerk.
Well, on that note, we got to go to commercial break because I can't say it any better than you said it. I got to say, I speak for millions of your fans across the country, that it is wonderful to see you. You had a stroke not that long ago. You couldn't talk. You were paralyzed, and here you are. You're the Bret Hart of old. That is wonderful to see. Stick around, right? This up front and every day's Jay Feaster tomorrow, Ryan Smith on Thursday, Dick Pound on Friday. Podcast. Go to tsn.ca and download. And up next, Bret stays for the panel, which means still to come, we get to answer the question for you. What do Bret Hart and William Shatner have in common? And if you say a love of pastry, that's Bill, not Bret. Up front tomorrow, the Lightning's general manager, Jay Feaster. They've got the Leafs that night on TSN. We'll talk about the up and down Leafs, plus something Toronto never has to deal with, why defending champ is a tough title to carry. You've carried the title for a long time, Bret Hart.
Yes, I have.
You carry the title as our favorite guest ever, and after 1,700 shows, that's a lot of guests. Great to welcome you to the panel. Bob McKeown, thank you for doing the show from the Fifth Estate. You broke the story this week on Mike Danton. You actually have tapes of his conversation with David Frost.
However strange you think the story is, it's stranger than that.
You'll give us more details, and we'll listen to a segment later on. Great to see you, my friend. Sam McCaig, welcome to OTR for the first time, writer for the Hockey News, well-suited for this show.
Great to be here.
And Mo Berg, congratulations. You have a new Best Of album, Pursuit of Happiness, and you now have a little girl, 3 days old.
That's right.
Congratulations. Good to see you, Mo. Last time there was hockey, Jason Spezza wasn't even a regular for the Sens. Way to go, Jacques Martin. Now he is their #1 center, was just named the player of the week, and he wants a spot on the Canadian Olympic team. Should he get it, even if it means leaving off a guy like Yzerman or Lemieux?
I think if you read between the lines, I don't think Mario or Stevie Y is going to go. They've both... Gretzky has said, you know, it's their option if they want to go to the Olympics.
I'm not sure Stevie Y is going to make it to his next NHL game, let alone the Olympics. I think you play your best players. One of the things that people love about sports is that it's a meritocracy, and you don't get a touchdown. They don't put 7 points on the board
because
because
who love sports, by the way, don't know what that word means. Just
well, you don't get 7 points for having nice hair or, you know, or a cute smile. You know, you have to go out and earn it.
Isn't the ultimate act of respect here for Gretzky, Wayne Gretzky, to say it's really up to Mario and Steve?
I think
But
that's what
doesn't he also know that isn't he also saying they're not going to choose to go unless they can play the way they should play?
There's one objective, and that's just to win the gold, and that means putting the best team out there. And
I agree.
That's the bottom line.
Jason Spezza is hot right now. He's one of the hottest players in the AHL, and I think he deserves a shot.
Do you admire a guy for lobbying for it? He says, we're 18-3, I'm on the first line, and you'd like to think that I'm going to get recognized. Do you like a guy who says, whoa, how about me?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
What a breath of fresh air in a sport with a lot of humble guys. Let's face it, of all the professional sports, hockey players are the most understated. Let's hear it for somebody who says, I want to go.
I want guys out there that are
Nice
hungry to
say
be
the
there.
Best there is, best there was, best there ever will be every night. You know, so, I mean,
It
sometimes
shows
you
that
got
he's
to stand
hungry,
up
shows
and
that he
shout it
wants
out.
There's all kinds of guys that ham a hob about going to Olympics, and they, I think someone who's
What do
really...
you do with Mario, Mo? You jump in first here. Here you got a guy who's carried Canada. I mean, he's the definitive Canadian hockey player of his current generation, right? But he's a -16 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. What do you do with Mario Lemieux?
It's a hard thing because Mario brings things to the table that aren't just stats. I mean, I think his presence in the locker room brings a lot to the young players, and I mean that's a real tough call.
Mario doesn't want to be remembered as just another Hulk Hogan.
Which is, what a great singer. So you're saying Mario should take a pass, but the complicated point for Gretzky would be, is if Mario doesn't call him to say, hey, leave me off the team.
These are three counterparts around the same age. They've played a lot of international hockey together. They've really been through the grinder together. I think they're just trying to take the classy route. Gretzky's
Do you
leaving
build
the
a
door
team
open
on
for
youth,
them.
Sam? Because in 1998, they used a lot of experience. They had this philosophy of having people mesh together. You got to have the veterans, and we did not win the gold. Do you build it on youth now?
I might build it on youth, but I don't think Gretzky and the current management for Team Canada is going to.
Really?
They like proven
Who do you think
winner.
they'll put on the team that, in your mind, if you were picking the team, wouldn't be there?
Well, it's funny, no disrespect to a guy like Chris Draper, who's a great checking center, a great two-way player, a really good skater, and he actually scored some goals his last couple seasons. But, if you're going to keep off guys like Eric Stahl and Sidney Crosby, Jason Spezza, right now Todd Bertuzzi's on the bubble. So we've got so many great players in Canada.
One of the problems when you have things like this, picking teams or handing out awards, is like that's what the only time in sport when the old boys club kind of kicks in. It's like that's something I think that you really need to be pretty careful about.
Got to cut you off. Got to go to break. Still to come on this edition of the show. Now that Carlos Delgado is back to kissing American ass, we ask: is there really only one true renegade Canadian left?
Did you ever notice the United States of America is shaped like one big giant toilet bowl? And the reason is because most Americans are just plain full of crap.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
Up front on Thursday, the Oilers' Ryan Smith. He is rolling lately, and he was on our last Olympic and World Cup teams. Here's a guy who has always been there for Canada in the past, and we've got Ryan Smith on OTR up front on Thursday. So God bless America, the only country that can gag you with a constitution that promises you freedom of speech. Carlos Delgado with the Blue Jays and the Marlins refused to come out for God Bless America as a protest. Now, as a New York Met, he says he will. He says, quote, I'm employee number 21. I'm not going to put myself in front of the team. I'm here to follow orders. Do you have more or less respect for Carlos Delgado now?
Just as much respect. Here's a guy, he's gone on record. We know what he believes politically. Here he is taking a very practical stance in a city where I spent the better part of the past decade and a half. You don't want to be not standing for God Bless America in New York City.
I think it really depends on what his motives is. If he just wants to be a team player, if he doesn't want to distract from the team, and we've seen what's happened in Philadelphia when a guy acts out and distracts from the team. I think if he's honestly doing this because he wants to be a team player, then I applaud him.
But how do you respect a guy for backing off his principled stance? I mean,
Everybody knows
he stood
what
up for what he believes in.
In my opinion, it's a win-win.
He made it very clear. His personal feelings remain.
Yeah.
He's simply not going to be exercising them in a public
He's
way.
being told. He had a protest, and he said, I'm not going to come out. And the Blue Jays said that they were good with that. The Marlins said they were good with that. And now the New York Mets say they're not good with that. And he says, okay, I'll bow to pressure. I've lost respect for a guy who I had a ton of respect for before.
He's the only guy who took that stand. How can you lose respect for that?
Yeah, shame on the Mets.
He put himself in a vulnerable position,
After the Olympics
and everyone
in
knows.
Moscow,
Sorry, Bret?
After the Olympics in Moscow, there's not a lot of room for politics in sports, or there shouldn't be. And if you do decide to mix them together, you better make a stand and stand by it.
So what do you think? I mean, do you have less or more respect for Carlos Delgado now that he's backed off because the team has asked him to?
Well, I think maybe if you were in his shoes, maybe he's made his point. maybe
It's not the
time.
lack of politics in sport, by the way, because if you look at the opening ceremonies on opening day at Shea Stadium, they're going to have more military personnel than they did in Red Square back in the 1980s.
Shouldn't
this is a militaristic era.
Shouldn't his union or Bud Selig or someone jump in? Jeff Wilpon, the Mets COO, says, quote, he's going to have his own personal views, which he's going to keep to himself. Doesn't he need someone pushing for him to say it's his right in this society?
Sports unions are crap. And they don't back their members on anything, any health issue, any political issue. I mean, it's all about money for them, and I wouldn't expect anything less from any.
So
any
Donald
union.
Fear makes a huge point to say that you can't test our guys unless we approve it. That it's all about an individual's right and certain freedoms. Yet you can shut him up like that. Like I just think that he's being betrayed by the people around him.
I think you're absolutely right. I think
I'm loving you, Sam, because of that. Because no one else sees it the same way.
I agree with you too. I'm just saying they're crap. I'm just saying sports unions are crap, but they should. They absolutely should be coming to his
How
defense.
long has it been since somebody at Yankee Stadium on that baseball team has been allowed facial hair? I mean, it doesn't always rise to the level of politics here. The control over the lives of those guys is fairly extensive.
And part of the problem is I don't think that God Bless America was meant to be a long-term thing. I think it came in right after 9/11, and maybe it was going to happen for just a couple of months. And now I think that Major League Baseball is in a really tough position where it's like, how do you say, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, and not look sort of unpatriotic or weird to people?
Yeah, they're in a tough position because it's tough to take it back, and you're right that they could look unpatriotic, and certainly in the U.S., in the last, I guess, any time, especially in the last 5 years, unpatriotic is a very bad word.
Here's the problem that some would have with this, that they make it a patriotic event when they play God Bless America. They say it is political, it is all about supporting your country, and if a guy says, well, I don't have the same view as the country that I'm playing in, they tell him to shut up, which I think is the height of hypocrisy.
This is something that the Bush government has been excellent at doing.
Height of hypocrisy?
No, they've been great at making anybody who doesn't agree with any of their policies seem like they're being unpatriotic, and that's one of the really devious things that they've accomplished.
Little trip to Guantanamo Bay may straighten them out. On that note, we go to break. As we go to break, we always want to know your thoughts, questions for the guests, maybe some questions for Bob tomorrow in response to today's show. But, with Bret Hart sitting here, we're going to have a question for him. Bret the Hitman Hart. Hey, Bret, what's the worst anti-Canadian insult you've ever had hurled at you from the stands? You want to think about that one, or do you have one that comes to you?
I got to think about it.
We'll think about that, and we'll have that answer for you when OTR returns. Body up front with Dick Pan. I got to get to you and ask the question that one of our viewers asked. What's the worst thing that an American said to you?
Well, probably the worst thing that was said was stuff like, Canada sucks, eh? Yeah. But it was never the things that they said. It was always the things that they threw. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but
Those quarters will really hurt? So they would really throw stuff and try to hurt you, right?
Yeah, they'd throw maybe 100 people would throw quarters around the same time, and about 20
That's
of them would bounce
$25,
off your
Bret,
head.
the way I calculate it. Bret Hart, the Hitman is the name of the DVD. If you follow wrestling, if you have followed Bret Hart, you got to pick this up. Thanks for doing the show, man.
My pleasure.
So, Bob, tell me, Mike Danton, what's something that you learned through preparing this piece, which goes tomorrow on the Fifth Estate, that you didn't know ahead of time?
That he was a straight-A student at St. Mike's when he played for the St. Michael's Majors in the OHL. That, according to one of his girlfriends, he's a songwriter and likes to compose and sing ballads. But I think the most enlightening thing about this show is the FBI tapes we got of conversations between Mike Danton in jail for trying to have David Frost killed and Frost. And you see two things. You see that Frost immediately has reassumed that role of Danton's mentor. And secondly, especially when they say goodbye, that this was a most unusual relationship for an NHL agent and player.
So let's roll the clip of that conversation right now.
And I mean done. 7 to 10, Mike, because of that. Okay? Are we clear? Yeah. You know me? Yeah. Say it. Okay. Do you? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Who did you get to talk to when you were preparing this?
Not many people in hockey. Strangely, most of the coaches and players who worked with Frost and Danton wanted no part of this.
Not that strange. Actually,
No,
it totally. When you
it's
were
a
going
quiet
into this, you had to
world.
think, which is the nature of your job, doing what you do. People don't go, Bob, come on in. We'd love to talk to you.
But that almost made it better, Michael, because the people we talked to were like landladies who saw this from a normal person, a civilian's viewpoint, and who really saw what was going on, what the hockey people were ignoring.
But you did talk to David Frost, right?
We encountered Mr. Frost, and you'll get a good idea what he is like when you see the show.
And we can see the show
9 o'clock Wednesday, Fifth Estate on the CBC.
So this is really an inside look at a story that almost every Canadian knows. Like with the hockey news, obviously, you've covered this story, you've followed this story, but you're getting new stuff here.
Yeah, and you know, the more we learn about this story, the more sordid it is. It just becomes seedier and seedier, and you've got this one-sided sort of bullying, controlling relationship with Frost. You know, and he gets these guys when they're 16, 17, just really impressionable kids that want to make the NHL and are willing to sacrifice and do whatever it takes.
It has a lot to do with the fundamental nature of hockey. That in the U.S., because football and basketball go through universities, you may turn your child over, your son or daughter over to a college coach, but there are checks and balances. In junior hockey,
gotta cut you off.
There aren't.
Amazing story. Great to see you. Thanks for doing OTR today. Great to see you, Bret.
Off the Record with Michael Landsberg is brought to you by the McCaig Steakhouse and Bar. For great steaks, good friends, see you tonight. Michael Landsberg's clothing, supplied by Got Style, Toronto's newest menswear store and spa.